Well, hello, and welcome to Zero to Social in 6.5 Steps. This is a Real Magnet webinar about setting up your social media strategy and getting into and through that crucial momentum building first stage. My name is Mike May. I'm the Director of Insights here at Real Magnet. If you are not watching this webinar live and you do have questions about anything you see in here or anything related to the topic here, go ahead and email me at mmay@realmagnet.com or just reach out to me at Twitter at MikeMaySay. Just keep those in mind and fire away if you have any questions. So let me start by telling you who this webinar is designed for, and who meaning which companies and also which people. It's really aimed at the organizations and the people within these organizations where the social program is at its incipient level. Either there isn't a social program in place yet, there's no Facebook page, there's no Twitter account, you're not doing anything meaningful on LinkedIn, or you're at the, okay, it's up, now what phase. It happens at a lot of companies where there's an interest in social media, but then getting through that initial part and building that crucial momentum and creating that content and knowing who's going to be responsible for it and getting the program to the point where it's large enough that it's contributing meaningfully to business objectives is a challenge. And that's exactly what this webinar is aimed at, getting into that momentum and through that momentum building phase. As far as I'm concerned, there are really a couple of goals to a social media program. It's not to be cool, it's not to be hip or contemporary, it's not to be on social for the sake of being on social. Like email, the goal of your social media program is to drive your business objectives. It's that simple. So when you craft your social media strategy, it should be with those business objectives in mind that you're already supporting through your other communications channels. And we're going to talk specifically about that in a couple of minutes. And the other mandate that I have for a social media program is also like email. It's important to use metrics in order to analyze what you're doing with social media so that you can become smarter as marketers and you can figure out how the channel fits into the rest of your marketing mix. So you can use it strategically, you can use it for the types of content and the types of objectives for which it's uniquely suited, and also take the pressure off of email and some of your other channels by shifting some of the burden to social. Analytics and metrics really let you accomplish that effectively, and without it, even if your social program is strong, if you don't know how to integrate it with the rest of your program and how to share the workload, then you're missing out on a really big opportunity. So normally I would start with, well, why social? I think we're well past that. And here's a few examples why. Facebook IPO is coming up. It's a $5 billion valuation for this company. What this means is that social is not just big. It's big business. A $5 billion valuation can't all be hype. There are a lot of companies that are genuinely profiting off of social media. And at that size and this scale, it can't just be companies like Facebook and the technology and tools that support the Facebook ecosystem. There are brands, there are marketers who are profiting nicely on Facebook. So there's real money to be had there, and there's real business to be done on Facebook and other social channels. It's also culturally pervasive. Social is no longer a test channel. It's no longer where innovators go exclusively, and it's no longer the cutting edge. It's part of the mainstream of our society's fabric in almost every aspect. The Dalai Lama is a very good example. Not only is he on Twitter and using it very effectively, he's got 3.5 million followers worldwide. So, social is proving that it's a place that's capable of aggregating millions of people around concepts and ideas with a remarkable reach. What I like best about the Dalai Lama is that despite having over 3.5 million followers, he's following nobody. The Dalai Lama is a true leader, and this is a place where, and social media is a place where he chooses to execute on that. But the other thing that's really interesting about social is despite its vast reach, it's also highly targeted. allowing marketers or anybody else to reach even the narrowest niches within very precise markets. No matter who you are, there is a way to use social media to drive your business forward. What can we use social for? What I'm going to do here is chart a number of different marketing channels that we're all using currently, or a lot of us are using currently, against these axes of branding and direct response. Let's start with email. Huge direct response, obviously, value in email. Everything from lead generation all the way up to through lead qualification up to transaction. There's no question that most brands are using email in a direct capacity. Now, you can also see that it's creeping up the branding continuum as well, and I think that's a part of email that's a little undervalued. Every time your message is occupying a preview pane, even if your customers aren't clicking through, even if they're not making a transaction, that's a huge branding impression. And even when they're not getting that far, just seeing your brand in the inbox and seeing the subject line that telegraphs a certain content is an opportunity to deepen that brand impression and to position your company in a certain way. So metrics notwithstanding, I do think there's some branding value in email. Search, on the other hand, is almost all about direct response. It is a fantastic channel for finding in-market prospects, as we all know, and it also works all the way through to driving transactions. It doesn't have nearly the branding impact of email, but it doesn't need to. It's all about the clicks. That's what you're paying for, and that's what search does exceptionally well. Content marketing. This is all of the content that you're creating, from blogs to videos to white papers and webinars like this one. You can see there's some direct response value in this marketing channel. White papers, for example, are often used for lead generation, webinars for lead qualification, things like that. But much of content marketing has a branding objective. It allows you to position your company in almost any way you want, as educational, as authoritative, as entertaining, as informational. Any adjective that you want to describe your company, you have the opportunity with content marketing to further that objective. Now, what's interesting about social is that I think it does both branding and direct response pretty well. It doesn't do direct response as well as search. It doesn't do branding as well as content marketing and other types of brand advertising, but it does some interesting stuff. For example, we're already seeing on the direct response continuum that some brands are reporting they are generating more direct website referrals through social media than they are through search and through their other existing direct response channels as well. Facebook and for some retailers, Pinterest, I'm seeing some reports, are driving tremendous traffic. So there's an opportunity to use social and really make people aware of what you're doing and drive some activity from those people, depending on the type of content you've got there. The branding side of it, though, I think is what's particularly interesting about social. The channel is all about engagement, which is another way of saying it's about deepening your customers' understanding of who you are as a brand and qualifying them as prospects and as repeat customers. That's what engagement does. It makes your brand more relevant to your audience, puts them more in their lives so that they have a more open connection with you on a regular basis. That can only lead to more business. How do we get started? So here's what we're going to be going through today. Here are our 6.5 steps. We are going to identify the resources within your organization who are able and qualified to contribute to your social program. We're going to talk about how to choose the channel or channels that you might want to be in, which social sites make the most sense for you, and go through some of the basics and the advanced strategies behind setting these up. We're going to talk a lot about content strategy. What types of content works well in different channels and how to position yourself using content within each channel to fulfill your business objectives. Integration is very important as well. We're going to talk about how to use or how to work your social programs into the rest of what you're doing within your marketing programs so it's all seamless and everything is complementing each other. Audience development, of course, is mission critical. There's no point in going through steps 1 through 4 if you've got 12 people following you on 12 Facebook fans and half a dozen Twitter followers. Social is really appealing because of the massive scale that it represents. There are millions of people in on social media. They're not all a great fit for your brand, but almost everybody, or a significant percentage of who is a great fit for your brand, is in social media. So we do want to see sizable audiences behind our social efforts in order for the ROI to be where it can be. I talked before about measuring and analyzing and tracking and how important that is, and I'll give you some specific examples about how we can do that, and also show one of the tools that we have at Real Magnet called Social Magnet that allows you to accomplish just that. And finally, the 6.5 step is amplify. Once we've knocked out all of those basics and you're well on your way, I will spend a little time talking about what's next. Other ways you can take what you're doing with social and do more of it, make it louder, reach more people, drive engagement in new and interesting ways. So step 1 is identifying the resources available within your organization who can contribute to your social program. The difference between social and email, for example, as well as other marketing channels, is that social is equal parts proactive and reactive. Absolutely, you have to think ahead of time about the kind of content you're going to push into your social channels, and you have to work on creating it. You're not going to get very far sitting down in front of the keyboard or in front of your mobile device a few times a week and telling your audience where you went to lunch today. There's real energy that has to go into developing your social content on the proactive side. But at the same time, what's unique about social is that it's a channel where your audience thinks they're going to be listened to. And because that's their expectation, in order for your social strategy to work, you have to be prepared to respond when people reach you directly on Twitter or leave a comment on Facebook. You have to have people in place who are able to respond to that. Also, so much of social success is timing. If there's breaking news and you want to be on top of it because it's important to your industry and that's a parade that you strategically need to get in front of, your window for doing that is 10 or 15 minutes. After that, it is all over the Twitter sphere and all over Facebook, at which point you're no longer in a leadership position by announcing that news or by being involved in that news. Then you're just following. So being nimble and having people in place who are able and empowered to act at a moment's notice and create content that you are confident is going to represent your brand well within these channels is really important. If you want to trend, you've got to tend. And what I mean by that is, unlike email, for example, where you can have a sustainable program with a once a week or even a once a month newsletter, social is every day, or almost every day, to be effective. And it's just something you have to put constant energy into. Tending, I think, is a really interesting word, and we'll come back to this a couple of times today, because each of your efforts doesn't need to be, a Herculean task that takes you 3 hours to compose and then needs to be laid out or something. It's, each one of these you can make an impact in 90 seconds, in 60 seconds in social media, but you have to be prepared to do it on a regular basis. And so it's the resources required to do that, the availability of the resources, and the focus of these resources is very different from some of your other channels, and it's really important to be prepared for that. The good news is that everybody in your organization, for better or for worse, is already on Facebook and or Twitter, and certainly LinkedIn. And for that reason, there's already a lot of domain expertise around creating engaging content in social media within your organization. Normally, it's marketing or communications or PR that ends up taking the lead on social media, but there are other people across every functional responsibility within your company who have expertise, who can create powerful content, who are connected to your brand and have an authentic voice for your company, and I'll bet a lot of them would be more than happy to be involved in your social program. And the good news there is that this actually is a channel that works great if you've got a team of people involved and committed to it. So, there are some situations where centralizing content creation makes a lot of sense. I think in social, decentralizing content can be a huge win for companies who figure out how to do it well. Now we're going to talk about choosing the channels for your social programs. And what we're going to do here is we're going to start with business objectives. What is it you hope to get done? And then we'll talk about which channels, which of these sites, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, which are the three main ones that we're going to focus on today, are appropriate for different business objectives. From there, we'll look at the effective content. What type of content flies well within each of these channels? And then I'll talk a little bit about the successful personality of that content or of the brand. And what I mean by that is audiences and audience expectations within each channel are a little bit different. Now, it doesn't mean that every brand can't work in every channel, because I think every brand can work in almost every channel, but some brands adapt more naturally to the tone of conversation within these channels than others. So we'll talk about a little bit about what that means and how to make it work for your brand, and whether or not it even makes sense for your brand to be in some of these channels. So Facebook drives powerful word of mouth. It really is, at its core, a recommendation engine. All of the content in the word of mouth, all of the likes, all of the comments, the whole site is organized around allowing people to show their friends or to learn from their friends what it is they're interested in. So when people interact with brands, everybody who's their friend gets to see that interaction, and it's a great way for brands to be made to appear in front of other people and boost awareness. Brand development is another very powerful objective that Facebook can accomplish really well. Every time people are interacting with a brand, and every time a brand is creating content that's successful and driving interaction, is an opportunity for that brand to further position itself within this audience and drive deeper engagement, which is the last step. I talked a little bit about what engagement does. It does make your brand more relevant to your customers. And if your customers are spending a lot of time on Facebook and they're there to have fun, or they're there to learn, or they're there to connect, and your brand is involved in that, that's a very powerful place to be if you're doing it well. Twitter in business is used largely, I don't say exclusively, but largely for content broadcasting. And I'll give you some examples of this in a little bit. But if you have a lot of content, blog content, articles that are being published in the trades, interviews with your executives that are showing up on TV or the trades, that sort of thing, or you're going to a lot of conferences or whatever, Twitter's a very good place to broadcast that, because of the way a lot of people use Twitter to absorb information and scan their environments. Customer service is another business objective that can be achieved through Twitter. A lot of organizations have shifted a significant percentage of their customer service operations to social, and Twitter is the first place that most of them go. And so we'll show you an example of that as well. And of course, engagement, for the same reason that Facebook works with engagement. If that's a business objective of yours, Twitter is a good place for it. LinkedIn, and throughout this whole webinar, we'll talk about LinkedIn a little bit differently. It is a horse of a different color in that the opportunity for LinkedIn is less around brands and more around individuals. It's where people go to network. The brand presence within LinkedIn and the tools that brands have to network and to drive engagement and build awareness are more limited there. So, but we'll talk about that as well. That said, if your business objectives are really more closely tied to direct revenue, lead generation, lead development, and also education, LinkedIn is a very good channel for that. So let's talk about the effective content within each of these channels. Facebook is all about interaction. That's how it works. Interaction drives word of mouth. Interaction is what accomplishes awareness, brand development, and engagement. So the content that you create for Facebook has to be interactive. It has to be engaging itself. Multimedia works fantastic. Photos and videos, things that people can see quickly and digest that that compel a response. I like this. I'm going to comment on this. That's what works great. Interactive elements, asking questions, engaging your audience directly that way. Those work well when they're genuine, and that's an important distinction to make. Your customers, your audience on Facebook, they're savvy. They're following a lot of different brands, and they're also seeing what dozens or hundreds of their friends are doing on Facebook. When you think about the competitive environment, you're not competing with the other firms in your segment or in your industry when you're on Facebook. You're competing with your audience's college roommate or spouse or softball team or whoever else they're connected to online. You want your content is going to be juxtaposed with the content from all of these other people, and in order for it to be effective, it has to be just as engaging and just as interesting, and that's no small feat. So, the interactive elements are one way of doing that, but at the same time, your audience can tell if you're fishing. If you go onto Facebook and you say, "Happy Monday, everybody, how was your weekend?" and you haven't had any interaction with your customers previously, with your audience on Facebook, and there hasn't been a lot of interaction and chatter, and that channel of communication isn't open, your audience is going to know you're just trying to drive responses. And in truth, you probably don't care how your audience's weekend was. You don't know who they are as people at this point. So if you're going to ask questions and try to drive responses, it has to be genuine, it has to be authentic, and you actually have to want to know the answer. It also has to be relevant to your brand, and we'll see an example of this some examples of this in a little while. On Twitter, one of the things people look to for Twitter is information and environment scanning. It's a great place to see who's reading what, to see who's recommending that you read this or take a look at that, particularly in a business landscape. So articles and blog links are very effective content, both your own and others. Also, the other 2 points I have here, epigrams and relevant observations. The difference between Twitter and the other channels is its 140 character limit. You have to be very concise within Twitter, and the most effective Twitter content is tight. It's very pithy. So epigrams, these one-liners that capture a sentiment really well, that don't require a lot of explanation and are just very simple to grok, but are still insightful. That's the kind of content that works very well on Twitter. Now, the hard part is crafting this content as a brand, because it really is easier to have a sharp point of view if you're an individual. So some brands can get away with it, but if yours isn't one that can do that, chances are there are people in your organization who can and who do use Twitter for this, in this way, where they have these relevant observations on the industry or these very concise concepts that they're able to communicate really effectively. So one of the things that you can do with your brand Twitter page is to co-opt the personal brand of the people who work with you, who work at your company. If somebody says something particularly clever, you can retweet it and let your audience know that this really smart and entertaining person works for your company, and you're implying that you share this point of view, even though you're not making it yourself. So there are ways of taking advantage of the personal brand of the people who work at your organization. LinkedIn, there's an opportunity for articles and blog links, which we'll talk about when we get into another section. But I think the most effective content for brands on LinkedIn are actually the profile pages of your employees. When you go to your brand page at LinkedIn, there is some content there, but most of what you see is the list of people and the titles of the people who work at your company who are on LinkedIn. And so the more comprehensive that is, and the more accurate that is, the better your brand is represented. Let's talk about the personalities of these different contents. I mentioned, the juxtaposition of content within Facebook, how your stuff is next to the content by your audience's spouse and kids and college roommates and Thursday night poker buddies and everybody else. So there has to be an element of energy, and there has to be a social aspect to it as well, or that's effective. It really helps your content stand out within that context. And the other personality that ends up working very well within Facebook is to be approachable. Because it's not a channel that's just used for broadcasting, and because you want interaction in order to make the channel work successfully, you have to be seen as a brand that's listening, as a brand that someone can come to and like something or make a comment. So that means when someone comments, or there's a comment stream on some content on your Facebook page, you have to be prepared to go in there and respond to that and participate in that conversation that you've started. And that helps position you as approachable, which invites more and more people to comment. Most of the time when people are commenting on content within a brand page on Facebook, they're doing two things. One is they know they're showing their audience that they're interested in this brand. But in a B2B context, more often, or in a smaller business context, more often they're actually asking a question, or they actually want to be recognized or responded to. So make sure that you're doing that, because that shows other people who are watching this happen that, you know what, if they have a question, this is a place to go also. Twitter, because it's a channel where so many people are going to for environment scanning and to collect information and to see what's happening, to sort of put their thumb on the pulse of their industry, being informed and being insightful are particularly important. It's not enough to just retweet all of the articles from the biggest trade publication in your industry that everybody else is already reading or has already retweeted. Some of that, in a way that makes sense for your organization, is fine. I always recommend that if you're going to retweet something, or if you're going to throw a link to an article on another site or an industry trade, that you put some context around it, why it's important to your audience in particular, or something in there that is particularly relevant to a conversation you're having, to something else that's happening within your brand or your industry or your audience. It shows, A, you have some empathy for your audience, you know who they are, you know what's interested in, what they're interested in. It shows also, which I guess is B, that the audience, or that the content is relevant to you as an organization. And finally, it shows that you've actually read it. You'd be amazed at how many people just retweet things without having read it. It's astonishing to me how many companies will retweet an article that is on a competitor's blog or on a competitor's website without even having read it and seeing that it's actually competitive content that they're retweeting. So, be mindful of that and read the content and show people that you've read the content, and filter and edit for them a little bit. The other aspect to that is, the editing aspect is, people want to discover new things on Twitter. So if all you're doing is passing along the likely suspects from the trades that your audience is already reading, you're not adding a lot of value. But if you're sourcing new content, if you're finding articles and research reports and blog links from sources that the rest of your industry isn't paying close attention to but should, that's really valuable as well. So unearthing something fresh is really valuable for Twitter. LinkedIn is where business gets done, and that's how the company has positioned the site, and that's how its users look at it. So the content that's most effective ends up being, productive, ambitious, and respectful in tone. The same sort of things that work on Twitter and Facebook don't work the same way on LinkedIn. It just has a little bit of a different personality as a site, and it changes the way most brands tend to approach it. So setting up your channels. Let's talk about the basics. First, on Facebook, when you start your Facebook fan page, know that you can't change your name. Whatever you choose, you're stuck with. And that includes capitalization, and that includes spaces. So be very mindful of that when you set yours up. Second, you need 25 likes as soon as you can get them. And the reason for that is, without 25 likes, you don't get a vanity URL on Facebook. If you have fewer than 25, then your Facebook URL is facebook.com/company name/21498XL2X3 or something like that. Some huge long identifier string. And so here's where you go to your staff and you say, okay, we're up on Facebook, everybody like us. And so it gets you over the 25 mark as quickly as possible. And then you can start to promote every place that's not online, on your business cards, for example, on printed brochures, at your event exhibit display, what your actual Facebook URL is. And that's also why picking the name is important, because you can't change it. So you want a name that's going to fit within that vanity URL and be recognizable. And the other basic is the icon. What most brands will do is they will put in a little square icon, which goes in the upper left-hand corner of their Facebook fan page, and they leave it at that. But you can actually create a longer image that's vertically oriented like a skyscraper. So instead of being 180 by 180 pixel square, I've seen them as long as 500 pixels long. So there's a bigger branding opportunity there, and I'll show you an example of that in just a little bit. Don't forget, featured photos. On your Facebook fan page, there is a bar across the top that's got slots for 5 photos. When you launch, you will launch with your icon, and that will be one of your photos. What Facebook does is it pulls in all of the photos that it can find on your wall and in your photo albums, and it randomly populates that space. Now, if you launch and all you have is that icon, you're going to have this your icon in there cropped awkwardly so that you can't really tell what it is, or it looks awful, and then you're going to have 4 blank spaces. And they're visibly blank spaces. It doesn't just fold in on itself. You can see there are 4 spaces that have absolutely nothing in them. And it looks like you're not tending this channel well. So when you launch, make sure you've got enough pictures in there to fill it. But then the other thing you can do is you can go into the preferences and select which photos you want to rotate into that space. You can even select only 5 and make sure that they always display, or you can select 10 out of 30 that you have up there and tell Facebook only rotate these through here. And that's important because your Facebook fan page is a little like your home page to some people. And so the content that you have on there, particularly the visual content, is very arresting and positions your brand. The same thing with featured likes. Just as if you're a person on Facebook, you can like another person and be their friend, if you're a brand, you can also like other brand pages. And over on right now on the left-hand side of your brand pages, there is a section that lists or that shows the icons of these other brand pages that you like. And I think they show 4 or 5 at a time. Now, let's say, for example, there's a brew pub around the corner from your office that everybody from the company goes to on Fridays after work, and you have a couple of beers. And for that reason, you really like this brew pub. And it may be part of your Facebook strategy to tell the world, you know what, we like this. And you go ahead and you like their Facebook page. Now, if you do nothing after that, chances are when someone comes to your website, a new prospect or a new customer who might not live in the same town and not have any idea what this brew pub is, they might see that brew pub on the icon for that brew pub on the list of favorite pages within Facebook. That might fit great within your brand, but it might not. And if it doesn't, think about what brands you would like to show up in there. Like your clients, like your key customers, like the associations that you do business or that you're members of, like your integration partners and technology partners. Whatever organization you have some sort of a relationship with whose brand represents yours well and helps you build credibility, those are the companies you should be liking. And then choose the ones, frankly, that are the most impressive to rotate through that, the ones that best help the story you want to be telling. Maybe the brew pub is part of that story, but maybe it's this trade association that everybody is a part of, or it's this integration partner that you know a lot of your prospects are really interested in, or it's these 3 clients that are your hallmark clients within different industries that you're targeting. Those should be the brands that people see when they rotate through. And the advanced setup on Facebook, the one that I'll talk about is a light gate. And I'll give you an example of this in a little bit so you can see what I mean. But what a light gate is a tab on your site that has content that you can only view if you're a fan of the page. So you get to this page and it's got this one content which essentially says, you could see this if you like us. So go ahead and like us and you'll see what's on the other side of this, and then it changes that content. It's a great way to share a promotion and generate a fan at the same time, or to reward somebody, or to have some protected content on the site. But it really is all about building your fan base. So think about what types of content you might want to put behind a like gate and see if that makes sense for you. With Twitter, the icon that you choose for your account is brand critical. And what's critical about it is that it has to be visible within in a very small size. If it looks fine on the Twitter site, that doesn't tell you the whole story, because most of the people who are going to see what you're doing on Twitter are looking at it through a mobile device where it's a tiny little icon, or through dashboards like Hootsuite and TweetDeck, for example, that shrink those icons down too. So when you have an icon that works for you, make sure that it works just as well when it's almost a quarter of the size that you see it on Twitter. The background image is also really important. What's most important about the background image is that you have one. It shows that, by not using a default image on Twitter, it shows that you're putting energy behind your program. So take a look at different brands and what they're doing with their background image, and figure out how you can use that media to represent your brand really well as well on Twitter. And finally, I mentioned before that the content in social channels is part proactive and part reactive. When you set up your Twitter account, you have the opportunity to set up different notifications. You can send an email or alert somebody's mobile device every time your brand is mentioned, every time some of your content is retweeted, or every time somebody new follows you. To take full advantage of Twitter, you want to know whenever any of these things happen so you can respond if necessary. If somebody is mentioning you, you want to know about that right away, not 24 hours later. Good, bad, or indifferent, you want to know what they're saying, and have people in place who are able to take advantage of that or respond to it. Retweeting is also really important. When people retweet you, it's good to know that so you can get right back to them and say, hey, thanks for the retweet. That's how networking is done on Twitter, and what builds an audience. Don't forget, remember what I said about what people use Twitter for: environment scanning, to learn new things, to get smarter in business about what's interesting to them or what's important to their business. So for that reason, you want to follow people and brands who inspire, who inform, and entertain. Twitter needs to be interesting. There's just so much content out there. You can't succeed if you're not interesting. There are a bunch of different ways of being interesting. Unique content is interesting. A unique point of view is interesting. Being funny is interesting. Having a different perspective or a different angle on the daily news is interesting. So following some of these people who are going to help you source some of this content that's interesting, or help you shape a point of view that you can share with your audience, becomes really important. And the other thing that following strong Twitter accounts does, it just serves as a good example. The more people and the more brands you can follow who do Twitter well, the better you get at figuring out how to use Twitter yourself and for your brand. And it doesn't mean emulating them, but it does help to see what works well. No real advanced setup in Twitter. The basics for LinkedIn: you've got your company profile page, and when you see that, you'll see that there are some opportunities to talk about products and your industry, and a lot of the boilerplate language is probably already on your website. I don't think you need to work too hard to pull that together. It's important that something is there. Don't forget, there's also a section on Twitter where you can import an RSS feed, so whenever somebody comes to your page, they can see a feed of the most recent content that you've imported through RSS. I like the blog. If your company has a blog, it's a very good place to drop that RSS feed. It means it's content that you're already creating, that you're just publishing in a different place. You know that it's content that represents your brand well, and it's just a very easy thing to do. I mentioned also that some of the most effective content are your employee profiles. So don't forget, if LinkedIn is important to your social program, encourage key staff participation. You want the same people, the leaders of your organization, the people who have contact with your customers, to to be on LinkedIn. I think you want everybody, as many people as possible on LinkedIn, because showing the the depth of your organization and all of the different people, I think is really powerful. So but at the very least, you don't want any gaping holes in the staff participation on LinkedIn. Now, the other things that you can do on your company page on LinkedIn is you can add a careers tab, and there's also a tab for products and services, and there's also another place for recommendations where people can actually, you have to go out and solicit recommendations for your company. Now, none of this stuff is mission critical, but I mention it because there are so few places to actually create content for your brand on LinkedIn that if you don't have these here, it almost looks like you're not tending this channel well. So pay attention to those and see if there's a way to fill some of that in as well. So at least it doesn't look like you're not paying attention to the channel. All right, on to content strategy. And we're going to start with Facebook. Facebook is all about interaction. The way that it works is it's organized around broadcasting, or actually narrowcasting, I guess, interactions between people and other people and other brands to the people who are their friends. So here's graphically what it looks like. You start with your content. You start with a question that you're putting up there that you're trying to drive some interaction with, or that you genuinely want to know the answer to. A photograph, a video clip from a presentation that one of your executives gave recently, whatever, a poll, a link to an article on your blog, whatever that is. You put that on your page and it reaches your primary audience. Now, if your primary audience interacts with it, then what happens is that interaction, that Susan from Akron, for example, liked this blog article and she commented, "What an interesting perspective. I never thought about it that way. Thank you for posting this." And Susan's friends then see that Susan has done this. She sees that she's liked something on your page and they see what it is that she's commented. Facebook uses an algorithm called EdgeRank to determine how relevant that content is for sharing, how relevant that interaction is for sharing. So the way that it works is that the more people who interact with content, you can see, if it's not just Susan in Akron, let's say it's also Larry in Duluth is interacting as well, we reach some of Larry's friends as well. And then Sally in Wichita interacts on it with that same content, and we reach more of that secondary audience. So the more people who interact, the more of their friends and family and coworkers you're reaching who are able to see this interaction. Now, not all of the people who are their friends are direct hits for your business, of course. So one of the things that Facebook has to do is use EdgeRank to determine how relevant this content is. The long and short of it is that the more people who interact with your content, the longer it stays in people's news feeds, and the more likely the secondary audience is going to be exposed to it, and the more people from the secondary audience is going to be exposed to it. And when that happens, the secondary audience then turns around and becomes part of your primary audience. That's how your audience grows within Facebook, and so your content strategy should be all about driving as much interaction as possible. If you're using it for content broadcasting, and every time you post something the crickets are chirping, you're not going to grow your audience that way, because nobody is seeing that content except for that primary audience who you've somehow pulled into your site in the first place. It makes it very hard to grow using content that way. So the interaction is what really leverages the unique qualities of Facebook in driving that word of mouth and those tacit recommendations. So here's an accelerator tip. Use your staff to like your content and boost EdgeRank. Whatever you do on Facebook, it does need to be authentic. So I don't think you should use your staff and have them posed as fake people or posed as prospects and talk about, and comment on some of your content. But to have a couple of people like it, what that does is it sort of backfills the EdgeRank. So then when somebody else does like some of your content or does comment on it, there are already a couple or three interactions with it that helps it linger in news feeds a little bit longer. It does help if you do that, but it's also important to do it in a way that's authentic and don't overdo it. So I'm going to go to, a couple of different examples on this content strategy. The first one I'm going to take a look at, we're going to jump right over to Facebook to take a look at these. This is the Dauphine Orleans Hotel. Let's see. So here's the hotel. And what they do is a light gate that I want to show you. First, I want to show you this icon here. You see how it's not just a square? This creeps down 500 pixels and represents a really strong branding opportunity here on the page. So we're going to go down to this page here, the All Access page. And what they do is, this is a tab that they've created on their Facebook page, and this uses something called an iframe, which allows them to drop in just plain old HTML and represent it the same way they would on any other website. They've got the full functionality of their reservation engine here, and you can even sign up for their email list right here. And that goes straight to their email sign-in list. Now, I'm a friend, so I'm actually seeing this already. Let me unfriend them to show you what it would look like. If you're not a friend and you get to this page, if you don't like this page, you get here, and here's a Facebook fan deal. Like us above to reveal an exclusive promo code for Facebook fans only. Well, you know that because you just saw it. Go ahead and like it. Yeah, I'll like them for a promo code. And then when you make your reservation, you can drop that promo code in right here and get your discount or your special rate or your special availability or whatever. So that's what a light gate does. It takes advantage of that interaction, of that visit to the site, and compels people to become a fan, which makes them likely to see your content later on. It's like getting them to sign up for your email list. It's a really simple but effective technique. Next example I want to show you is Vistaprint. And what Vistaprint does really well is customer interactivity. So we'll go to Vistaprint's site. They posted this at the end of the night. We're off for the night and we'll return all messages tomorrow morning. If you have an issue that needs immediate help, please call this number. They do this at the end of every single day. If you scroll down, you'll see, there it is, from the other night, the end of the day. I guess they go off at 5 o'clock off of Facebook. But what they're saying, essentially, when they haven't posted that, they're saying, at all other times, we're here, we're listening, we're paying attention to you. And so that's part of their strategy with everything they're doing on Facebook to drive interaction. Let me give you a couple of examples of what actually happens then. Here's pushing out some content, and they got some comments on that and some shares, and a bunch of people like it. But what they do really, really well, I think, is asking questions like this. Leap year only happens once every 4 years. Where was your small business 4 years ago? And people are commenting, and people are liking it. And there's one down here that I like. This is really interesting. When I think of spring, blank is the one color that comes to mind first. 110 comments on that, and people are sharing it as well. So none of these, are going to double their profit in a week. But what all of this content does is it shows their audience that they're paying attention, that they're listening, that they want to hear from their audience, that they're approachable as a brand. So then when they even post something as simple as what color makes you think of spring, they get 110 people to chime in. And that's 110 people who are then showing all of their friends and fans in their news feeds that they're interacting with Vistaprint. They like this company so much that they're going to tell them what color makes them think of spring. That's a pretty powerful position for Vistaprint to be in, and I think it's executed really well because everything they're doing on their Facebook site says, come talk to us, because we're listening and we're going to talk to you as well. Unique content, MTV. So let's go over to their Facebook page, and here's the first thing you'll notice. This just happened today or yesterday, I think. Facebook just announced that they are changing all of their fan pages to the new timeline, and brands have an opportunity to adopt it any time between now and the end of March, and I think at the end of March everybody gets shifted over. So this is what one of the new Facebook brand pages look like. On the one hand, here's the icon that they had previously, but they also, as a new brand page, have a much larger branding opportunity with this image that they can change whenever they want. MTV uses this image to promote one of their specific shows. But the other thing that MTV does is they leverage their role within the media industry with unique content. Get the scoop and look for MTV exclusive trailer tomorrow. This is their own show, The Challenge, so that's unique content to them. Updated their cover photo. Fellow columnist Dan Savage is someone who writes for them, and they have at MTV.com. So they have all of this content on all of their properties that they're able to leverage, and it's around celebrities, and it's interviews that they have, and video content that's exclusive to them, and they leverage that very, very well. And you can see, as a result, 2,500 people like it, 375 comments, 872 comments on this, right? 951 comments over here. And remember, every time somebody likes, somebody comments, 169 shares on the J-Lo cover. Every time somebody interacts this way, they are showing their entire newsfeed, their entire friend and family newsfeed, that they're interacting with this brand. So unique content is a really powerful way of driving some of that if your brand can do it well. And finally, we'll go to Starbucks, and what they do is they rely very heavily on customer-generated content. So you go to Starbucks page, and they also have adopted the new timeline page. But if you take a look at their content, here we are right on the homepage. This is from Tuesday, the view from above. This is something that Starbucks posted on their page. And then you go down a little bit, and then the next thing you see is a day ago, and then 5 days ago, and then 2 days before that, and then 5 days before that. So very different from MTV, who's posting every 3 hours. Starbucks is posting every few days or so. The real activity on Starbucks is the friend activity. Or I'm sorry, is the post by others. Friend activity is what your friends are doing on this page. So here it's a little bit different. 3 minutes ago, 11 minutes ago, 12 minutes ago, 12 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, 21 minutes ago, 26 minutes ago. People are sharing photos that they're taking of Starbucks, of stuff they're getting at Starbucks, talking about Starbucks. Thanks for bringing back the tribute blend. Awesome. And over time, they've tended this channel to show their audience this is what they want. Most of the content here on Starbucks Facebook presence is not generated by Starbucks. So you can see the stuff that these people are posting. There's not any interactivity, but that's okay. The mere act of posting something is a powerful interaction, and it's something that Facebook's Edge rank pays very close attention to. It takes more energy for you to post something onto a brand's Facebook page than it does to simply click the like button, and that's reflected in EdgeRank. So this stuff spreads even better than liking and commenting on an article. And Starbucks has really cracked the code on getting people to post this kind of content on their page. And you can see as a result they've got 29 million people liking them. So from a content strategy perspective, they've really figured it out. Twitter. I mentioned some of the things that Twitter can be used for. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. 4C, well, I mentioned broadcasting, content broadcasting. 4C is a business-to-business company. They're a technology company in the retail industry, online retail, offering analytics and insights, technology like that. So they're doing a few different things here. On the one hand, right at the top, we've got a new blog post from Larry Fried, and Larry is somebody who works there, and they are doing two things here. They are mentioning Larry Fried's Twitter name, so you can follow him directly, but also if you do already follow him, now you know that he works for 4C. So they're promoting him as a personal brand within their organization, but they're also co-opting his personal brand and saying, this really smart guy who you might already have heard of, he's one of ours. And so that's a really smart thing to do. Here, what they're doing, the second one, they're saying we're going to be at this conference. Come visit us at this conference. Here's where we'll be. And here's a research report that we were just involved in producing. Here's a link to that if you want. Content broadcasting. There's nothing particularly interactive here, but it's all unique stuff that they as an organization are responsible for, and they're using Twitter to let people know about it. I mentioned customer service as well. Zappos probably has the best customer service of any retail company, or there's certainly the reputation of best customer service of any retail company in the country. So this is the Twitter account that they use expressly for service. You can see it's the Zappos service account. They have a bunch of Twitter accounts, but this is the one just for service. You can see at the bottom how approachable they are. Hey guys, Tanya here with you. My name's Tanya. I'm working the Twitter account right now. And she's essentially saying, you got questions? I'm here. Whatever it is, I got this. Right? So Teresa is dead must have sent a comment. We don't see what Teresa said here, but we could click on that and go through and see it. And you could see that she's finishing up something with Teresa. You're welcome, Teresa. I hope if you need anything, you'll let us know. And then she tells Fee Fi Fo Menifer to wear the shoes around the house for a while because Fee Fi Fo Menifer must have gotten in touch with Zappos and said, I don't think these feel comfortable. What do I do? And Zappos says, wear them for a bit. If you don't like them, send them back. But the powerful part to this is that even though Tanya at Zappos Service is only talking to Fee Fi Fo Menifer, she's actually telling 12,000 people that, listen, you got a question about anything that has to do with a product you bought from us, ask here. We'll get back to you. We're paying attention. We're here right now in real time, ready to answer your question. So all of these people, there aren't 12,000 people who have a customer service problem today, but they're all following them just in case they do, and they know that this is a channel that's open to them. It's really powerful. Let's go on to the next one, engagement. This is PowerBar, a company that makes nutrition bars for athletes. Let's start down at the bottom. First thing they do is they say we've got an extra entry for this triathlon that we're not going to use. And they turn it into a bit of a promotion. Over the next 2 hours, essentially tweet pick me and mention PowerBar to everybody who follows you, and then from everybody who does this over the next 2 hours, we're going to pick a winner. So they turn this into a promotion that drives a ton of interactivity across Twitter. 2 hours later, they say, hey, we got a winner, and they talk directly to this winner. Congrats, man. We'll direct message you soon with all the information you need. Happy racing. And then the top one is they're just commenting on something, not driving traffic, not promoting anything. They're making an observation that one of their customers might make, and they're essentially saying, we're not just a brand. You can actually hear there's another person on the other side of this who's someone PowerBar's customers would like to hang out with. They'd like to go race a triathlon with this person or do a training ride or a swim with this person, and that's what PowerBar is trying to do. They're using the channel to drive engagement with their customers and to humanize the company in a way that I think works really well. So content strategy on LinkedIn, in a word, people, or rather groups of people. It's like I said, it's not a channel where your brand shines as much as your people shine. So the more of your people you can get involved in LinkedIn, and the more involved you can get them within LinkedIn, the more of that is going to come back to your company. So how do you get involved in LinkedIn? Once you have your LinkedIn profile set up as an individual, join groups that are relevant to your company. Join and start discussions within those groups. Answer questions. Ask questions within the LinkedIn questions or LinkedIn Answers feature. Even make status updates. You can link your Twitter account straight to your LinkedIn account so that whatever you tweet shows up as part of your status update in LinkedIn as well. And a lot of people do that, and I think if you're using Twitter for business, it actually does make a lot of sense. Go out and make new connections with people. Use it actively and proactively. Because every time this happens, LinkedIn notices and it bubbles that content up. It bubbles it up in a bunch of different ways. One, when you go to someone's page, if someone is your friend, you can see everything that they've done, where they've asked a question, where they're involved. They're involved in this group. They're leading a discussion over in this group, and it helps build their brand and help build your company's brand. But LinkedIn also uses email notifications more aggressively than ever. And so whenever people are using the service and interacting, that's showing up in inboxes as well. So all of that becomes really powerful. Again, none of what I've talked about here is a way that you're promoting your brand, but it is allowing your people to get more involved. And one of the principal things that people do within LinkedIn is they follow the path of people and see what's this company that this person works for, and that's how they learn about a company. So think of your people and their profiles and all of their activity is a funnel that leads back to your brand. And that's the way to use this channel effectively. Integration. Here's where we're going to talk about tying your social presence into everything else your organization is doing. And what integration accomplishes is it, first of all, it builds awareness of your social presence. It lets people who are on your email list or your website or are visiting your conference booth know that you're on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn to find you there. The other thing that it does is it seeds your social audience with your existing audience, and that's really important. Think about Facebook, for example, where interaction is so important. People who already are your fans and your customers are going to be more likely to interact with your content than people who are just getting to know you. That interaction is so important to boosting that edge rank and driving the dissemination of that content and reaching new people. You really want your core customers to be involved with you in your social channels as well to help you amplify your voice there. And the other thing it does is it shows that you're listening, not just in social channels, but if you're a brand that says, you know what, we're on Twitter, and here's all the stuff we're doing on Twitter, and we're on Facebook, and we're active there, and we're doing some stuff on LinkedIn, what you're saying is that as a brand, you're open for conversation. You're approachable. You're listening, you're paying attention. If you have a question, there are all of these ways you can contact us. This is not a voice maze organization. This is a place where we're attentive to what our customers need. So how do you integrate? Well, one way is through email. Share with your network, the SWYN links, where people can share your email content directly onto Facebook, as well as simply using your email template to promote your Twitter page, your Facebook page, what you're doing on LinkedIn, your other channels as well. The other way that it's largely overlooked is explicitly mention. People use icons to let your audience know that you're on Twitter and Facebook, etc., but actually using words to say, hey, don't forget, we're on Facebook, you can follow us here. Or are you on Twitter? And link to your Twitter page and say you can follow us on Twitter. Here's what we use it for. In addition to the blog, we will also use Twitter to share articles that we think are really relevant to our customers. So follow us there. Give them a reason and explain what you're doing there, and it makes a difference. There are a lot of personal ways of integrating as well, on business cards and signature files, for example. And not just the corporate presence, but if your employees are using Twitter, or in particular, or LinkedIn for business reasons, they should go ahead and put their own personal addresses on their business cards. If business is getting done there, you want to be in a position where you're helping them build their audiences, because that's an audience that you can co-opt, and they're going to be retweeting your content, and you're going to be retweeting some of theirs. So helping them build their personal brand is really valuable for your organization. The thank you pages after purchase, contact forms, etc., and also auto-reply emails are other very good places to promote what you're doing socially. And the reason is that these are points at which your audience is engaged with you right now, immediately. They've just filled out a form. They've just made a purchase. They've just subscribed to an email list. They've just sent in a question to your organization. So, to use that context and spin it into, hey, thanks for making a purchase. If you have customer service issues, we're over here on Twitter. Or thanks for your question. We're going to get back to you as soon as possible. In the meantime, you can always follow us on Twitter and Facebook here if you have other questions, and see what other people are talking about. Telegraph the content to these channels and give people a reason to join them, because they're already primed. All right, audience development is really important for social media, and the reason is that we've talked for a while about all of the energy that you need to put into your social presence to make sure you've chosen the right channels, you've set them up right, you've optimized them for the kind of interactions and the kind of content you want. You've chosen a content strategy that works for you, and you found the people who are going to execute on that content strategy. You've allocated resources, you've done some planning, you know where that content is coming from. And actually creating it is no small feat as well, as is tending these channels. So since you're doing that, you want to make sure you've got as much audience as possible to defray all of those resources against. So audience development in Facebook, and we'll talk about these via content, via networking, and paid and other. Facebook is largely content. We talked about EdgeRank and how important the engaging content is, and we talked about the Lightgate promotions as well. I mean, I can't say it often enough. If your content is not interactive on Facebook, you're not going to grow your audience. The other side of that is if you want to grow your audience on Facebook, you have to have engaging content. It's just the only way to do it. So on the one hand, it's a content strategy, but it's also, engaging content is your audience development strategy on Facebook. There are some networking opportunities. There are things you can do like Facebook events. If you have an event of your own, to mirror it in Facebook and saying, we have this event, it's a conference we're going to be at, for example, or it's a conference, our users conference we're holding. You can create an event within Facebook that is sort of a little piece of content within the service that people can share. And so that helps them network with some of their other, some of their fans and followers in a way that helps get your brand in front of some more people as well. Now, the other thing that I'll mention about Facebook is they do have Facebook ads available, and they're all pay for performance, so they're not terribly expensive. The one that I like best is sponsored stories. And essentially what this does is it just amplifies your fan base in the first place. There's a way to do a sponsored story which is very simple, which the user view of it is that if someone is a friend of Susan in Canton, Ohio, who is one of your fans, they'll be on Facebook, and then they'll see they'll see an ad in the side that says Susan is a friend of company A, and that's essentially the ad. And what it is it's sort of a tacit recommendation. The next, what's unsaid is you should check out this company too, because if Susan is your friend, you might like what they're doing. So there are ways of narrowing that by interest. So you're only reaching people you're reaching more of people who are like Susan in a business capacity. But that's a good way of taking your existing fan base and sort of fanning out through them a little bit more and accelerating the reach to a highly targeted audience. With Twitter, the best way to build your audience through content is to create the kind of content that gets retweeted and that gets mentioned on Twitter. Like I said before, it's about being interesting. If it's unique content, if it's an interesting point of view, if it's witty, if it's insightful, if it's pithy, if it's a link to something that nobody else has, if you're the first one out of the gate with a story, that's the sort of thing that gets retweeted. And that's what builds your profile. Because every time somebody retweets you, they are not just pushing the content out to their 100,000, 10,000 followers, they're pushing your brand out and your account information out. And that's how people find out about different brands to follow. Getting mentioned is the same way. Via networking, turn it around the other way. If you see interesting content out there, share it and give credit to the people who you're sharing it from. There's actually more value in giving credit than trying to position the content as your own, because the person you're giving credit to is then very likely to say, hey, thanks for sharing this, or thanks for mentioning me. And that gets your brand in front of their audience as well. So, there's a lot of quid pro quo in Twitter, where you mention me, I'll mention you. And it ends up working very well on helping you build your audience and generate awareness. Now, promoted tweets is an advertising option within Facebook or within Twitter that they're just starting to roll out. I've got it in parentheses now because it's only limited to some accounts, some of the larger accounts, and right now you have to, I think, be spending a minimum of $25,000 in advertising. So it's not something you're going to think about if you're just getting your Twitter program off the ground. I mention it because it's available, but not recommended right now. With LinkedIn, you can start groups. One topic would be one way to start a group for your organization. As a brand, you can start a group that's on a topic that's relevant to your organization. And then all of the conversation that happens within that group, you benefit from it a little bit. If you make it an open group, you're going to have people from all over the industry joining. You're going to have competitors joining. You're going to lose some of the control of the focus if you do it that way, but the reach of the people who are involved in that group ends up growing. And as the group owner, you can reach them directly. You can message to them, for example. You get to shape the story a little bit. So even though you're ceding some control, you still have some admin rights around the group that can be a pretty powerful way of taking advantage of that audience that you've grown. You can also start groups that are just user groups that are by invite only for your customers, for example, or for a certain segment. You don't grow your audience as much that way, and that's more of an engagement play. And also, of course, posting content. Starting discussions and posting content within groups all around LinkedIn is not something that a brand can do as much as the people within your organization can do. Again, the networking, less about your brand and more about your people. Join group, LinkedIn Answers, be active and visible within the service, and it can only help the people who are doing it as well as your brand itself. And also, if you do have groups, particularly an open group, you can cross-promote that within other groups within LinkedIn. So there are pockets of like-minded individuals all across the service. It's just a matter of figuring out where they are and having the right content to appeal to them. So the main thing to think about with audience development in terms of how often you're posting and what that looks like is tend. It's just the word I keep coming back to. You have to constantly pay attention to it, be ready to be reactive. There's some proactive elements to it as well. So let's talk about the proactive posting frequency per day. You know, we saw MTV is posting 5, 7, 9 times a day just because they have so much unique content. They also use an agency, and you know that's part of the deliverable that the agency has, is they have to post a certain number of times a day. They don't have the same resource restrictions that companies just getting started in social media do. You know, so with Facebook, I think if you're just getting started, 1 to 3 times a day is probably about right. You want to be in there on a regular basis, so it looks like you're tending this channel, because you are. You don't want to be in there so frequently that the content you're putting there is throwaway. You do want it to be meaningful. You do want it to be on point with what your content strategy is. If it turns out that you have a lot more content than that, you certainly don't want to hold back. But I think minimally you'd be looking at about this many times per day. Twitter's a little different. You know, you can tweet the same thing twice in a day. Content on Twitter is much more ephemeral, so it'll show up in someone's stream and then it disappears. And if people aren't paying attention when it's there, it just goes away, because most of the content is consumed not on Twitter itself. People don't go to your Twitter page and say, hey, what's this company saying? They've got something that they're using to monitor everybody, their feed of everybody who they're following. So if they're not paying attention when you tweet, hey, don't forget, registration for our webinar opens today. If they're not online at 9:30 when you tweet that, you can do it again at 2:30. That same tweet. So you know, it can be more frequent, and you have an opportunity to take advantage of that. LinkedIn's a little bit different, right? Because on the one hand, there's not a lot of opportunity to post content for your brand. You know, whether you've got your RSS feed or some other way that you're doing, you know, that you're putting some content in there for your brand, there's not much reason to do it more than once a day as a brand. But, you know, the opportunity with LinkedIn is that the more people you have within your organization who are involved in groups, who are involved in discussions, who are involved in LinkedIn Answers, the more they are creating content within the service, the better. And there's almost no limit to how much a distributed content program can work within LinkedIn. Okay, I want to talk about critical mass. You know, people ask, well, how many fans and followers do I need? What's the benchmark? In Twitter, the concept of critical mass doesn't really figure as much. Obviously, the more you have, the better, provided that they're qualified. There's no point in going out and following 1,000 people just because you know they're going to follow you back, unless they're people who are connected to your industry. You want to see the content they have, and the people who follow them are worthwhile for you as well. I think increasingly with Twitter, quality is winning out over quantity. So, you know, having 20,000 Twitter followers is not necessarily a sign that someone is doing really well on Twitter, but having highly engaged followers is. Facebook is a little bit different, and here's why. if you take a look at all of these, for every one of these brands, you've got the number of people who like it and then the number of people who talk about it. So with Starbucks, about 29 million people like it and 300,000 people are talking about it. What talking about it is this is the number of people who have liked a story, have commented on a story, or have posted on the wall within the past 7 days. And in Starbucks' case, it's 1.1%. In Southwest Airlines' case, it's 2.9%. Vistaprint, 2.2%. Here's an association, 1.3%. A publisher, a small business-to-business publisher, 2.6%. Small to medium-sized business, 1.6%. So they're varying, but they're all in between 1% and 3%. In fact, I haven't found anybody that's outside of that. Range. Lower, yes, but I haven't found anybody higher than that. You know, most of the companies that are doing a good job driving interaction, it's hard to get above 3%. So I think 2% is a pretty accurate benchmark. So think about what you want to do with your content. Let's say that your goal is to get 2 interactions per post, right? 2 likes or 2 comments or a like and a comment every single time that you post on Facebook. That's what gets something a little edge rank juice, so it's going to linger in news feeds a little bit longer. And the other thing it does is it actually is indicative of genuine conversation. If you have 2 people commenting, that's a conversation. If you have just one person commenting, it's not. It's just one person remarking. And increasingly what you want is conversations and dialogue, because that shows that your content is engaging the way it's supposed to. So if you're posting once every day, that's 5 posts per week, once every day on business days, and let's say you've got a 2% conversion, right? If that's the case, then you're looking at 10 interactions a week at a 2% conversion. In order to do that, you need 500 followers. If you have fewer than 500 followers, statistically, you can't reach those 2 interactions per post at a 2% conversion. You need a higher conversion to do that. So here's where critical mass starts to make sense. If you have fewer than 500 people, it's going to be really hard for you to take advantage of EdgeRank and the word of mouth within Facebook, because you just don't have the numbers to drive that conversion you need to get the comments and the interactions that are going to spread your message. So I don't want to say that when you get to 500 followers you've made it, and I don't want to say that if you don't have 500 followers you might as well throw in the towel. But that's your first goal. When you start to think about how big should my audience be, your first one is 500 on Facebook. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about measuring, tracking, analyzing, and ROIifying. And the key concept that we're going to look at here is channel attributions. We're going to take a look at some of the metrics that show what content works in each channel. We're going to talk about how to allow you to better target each channel with different types of content, and how to optimize your presence in each. The reason that we're going to go through this, part of it has to do with resource allocation and figuring out where to put energy, but a big part of it also is to squeeze as much productivity as possible out of each of your channels, out of email, out of Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and be able to figure out how to allocate resources and content strategically. If something works better in Facebook, well then let's limit it to Facebook, and then let's not put it in email. Let's save email for what we know works best in email. Take the burden off some of those existing channels whenever possible. So here's one of the reports that comes out of Social Magnet within the Real Magnet application. This is the activity calendar. So what you can do at a glance is take a look at the entire month of activity and see everything that you've done. In this graph, the red are email messages that have gone out, light blue and purple are social messages. And so the first thing that we see here at a glance is just the quantity. Obviously, there's a lot more going on in the end of the month than there was at the beginning of the month. And the question here, that we're able to ask is, are we tending? Are we doing everything we need to be doing within our social channels? The first 2 weeks, I think the answer probably is no. We could be doing a lot more here, this brand, than they are doing down here. So the calendar view immediately allows you to see whether or not at the very top level, are you active enough within these social channels? This next report is a channel comparison, and this is really telling. What this does, you're able to see within each of your channels how many messages you sent out, and this is over a 1 month period within each channel, and then how many clicks were generated by those messages within the channel. And this is really interesting because you get to see a couple of things up front, right? You get to see the number of clicks per message. Email is working great. In this case, we're getting over 100 clicks per email. Facebook, we're not getting nearly as many clicks per message. Twitter, we're getting closer to 13 clicks per message. So, in terms of the productivity per message, email is working great. But the other big difference that we see here has to do with tending. We are tending this Twitter account much more, right? So instead of a message every week or so, we're able to do several messages a day. Instead of 6 over the month, we're doing 85. So the total number of clicks is almost twice as many that we're getting from Twitter as opposed to LinkedIn. So here's an example where normalizing over a period of time makes a lot of sense. You can boost your frequency in your social channels. So taking a look at it in the context of a month makes more sense than just the context of a day or a week, for example, because you get through a whole cycle and you can see over the course of a longer period of time which channels are driving the most engagement. Now, simply knowing that one channel is driving more engagement than another is useful, but it's also really telling to figure out, well, why is this happening? How is this happening? And the other way we can do this, there's a report that I want to show you. Again, this is in Social Magnet, where you can compare category performance. Every one of your messages, you can assign a category to. For example, in this example, we have messages that are assigned to the newsletter category. And these are the email newsletters that we send out, as well as social posts where we link to a web version of the newsletter, webinar promotions, which we do via email and through social channels as well, and then also blogs. Whenever we post something to the blog in this example, we put it on the social channels as well. What's interesting about this in particular is that if you take a look in this in this column on the right-hand side, we're getting more clicks out of Twitter in this period than we are out of email or out of Facebook. And the reason comes from this number right here. We're driving a ton of engagement simply posting the blog, links to the blogs, because that's something that we can't do with email. That's the real win in social. There are some content that's just not big enough to do an email on or to do a separate email on. So whenever you've got something that's going up on the blog, or there's a photograph that you want to share from a trade show, or there is one of your executives is mentioned or is interviewed for an article in a trade publication, those smaller pieces of content that don't quite deserve their own email are perfect for social. And it shows a couple of things. A, that you've got an opportunity to disseminate this content, but B, that your audience they have an appetite for engagement that the social channels is able to meet. This is all incremental engagement. There's nothing going on within this blogs category, for example, helping to drive awareness of what you're doing on a blog that is cannibalizing email or cannibalizing any other channel. So this is all new engagement. It's pretty powerful if you use it accurately or effectively. So some of the other metrics that you can look at with Social Magnet, you can take a look at the reach per channel over time. I mentioned normalizing over time and why that's important. Reach per channel measurements allow you to figure out how many times a person within your audience has been reached over a period of time. With email, if you send once a week, that's 4 impressions multiplied by the number of people on your email list. Even if your social channels are smaller, you're able to reach them not 4 times a month, but 4 times a day, 80 or 100 times a month. So the number of impressions you're able to generate over a period of time can be pretty significant in your social channels. We saw a And the last graph, we're able to calculate the average number of clicks per message by channel. And that becomes really interesting because it gives you more visibility into how much activity you can expect from each of your channels. You can also calculate things like response rate per subscriber per audience. And what I mean by that is you're able to determine, well, here's how big my audience is in Twitter. Here's how many clicks I generated over this many messages. And you can start to anticipate over the course of a month, you can start to calculate over the course of a month, my email subscribers click X% at an X% click-through rate, and my social subscribers click at a Y% click-through rate. And so you can calculate from a direct response perspective, what's the exchange rate between the value of an email subscriber versus the value of a new social follower? Just from a direct response perspective over the course of the month, how many clicks can I expect from each new email subscriber? How many clicks can I expect from each new Facebook fan or Twitter follower? And it starts to really shed some light on how valuable the size of these audiences are and help you make decisions on, should I do a promotion to find more Twitter followers, or should I do a promotion instead to find more Facebook fans? And also coming soon, we're looking at some really interesting ways of tracking conversion straight through to purchase, and also integration with web analytics so we can quantify the relative value of clicks. So I don't want to lift the hood on that too much yet, but we're already looking at ways to do that because we know, it's a really interesting story to know where your clicks are coming from, what type of content is driving them across each channel. It becomes a complete game changer when you can tie those clicks to actual behavior on your website and say, not only are the clicks coming from this channel at a higher volume than this other channel, but they're spending more time on the website, the bounce rate is lower, etc. So that's what we're looking at next, because we really think being able to tell that whole story is really important. Step 6.5 is amplify. What are the ways you can add more content to your social programs once you get up and running and off the ground and you've got your basics handled? Well, one is promotions. Sweepstakes promotions, Lightgate promotions are a very good way on Facebook to bring people in who will like your page. And you can start to think about, outside of just your regular content strategy, what promotions can you run that are going to help you build an audience. Another type of content you can start to add once your program is up and running is, you might have some what I think of as social-friendly company activity already. If no one's paying attention to you on social channels, on Facebook, for example, if you don't have any conversation going, no one cares about your softball team, your company softball team. But if you do have that following and there is that social connection with your customers, then suddenly the things you're doing as an organization, there's an opportunity to start to promote that. And it's not to brag about it as much as to say, hey, we play softball. Who plays softball at your company? And it's another way of forging that affinity within your customers in a way that can only happen if your brand already has some content that's engaging and that's driving conversation. So as you get deeper into this and more successful, the kind of content that you can share that becomes effective and amplifies starts to broaden as well. There's also the opportunity for some made-for-social products. And, the example here is cause-related marketing. Organizations that are involved in cause-related marketing love social media because it's a lot easier to get behind curing cancer than it is to get behind fried chicken, right? So here's an opportunity for KFC to create something that they know is very easy for people to show their support for online in a way that promotes their brand. So, the next step in amplifying is, well, what can we do now that we have this social following to take advantage of that social following that we couldn't do before we had that social following? And here's one example, and there are examples in almost every industry as well. And finally, once your social program is really humming, even the most banal activity is Facebook friendly. Pizza Friday can be something you put on your Facebook page if you have fans and followers and who are engaged with you, and it's going to drive interactivity. Now, Is it strategic? Is this moving people closer towards, signing a service agreement worth $30,000 a year? No, it's not. But what it's going to do is humanize your company and boost that edge rank in Facebook and drive that interactivity and help spread awareness about your company. It's all in the name of approachability. So all of this is sort of cyclical. None of the examples here are something I would start with. This is stuff that you do after you've got your basics down and your program is going along pretty well. Things to try, things to take it to the next level. And then the other option, of course, is to add more channels. Then we won't go into any of these today, but these are some of the more common ones out there. Pinterest and Tumblr gaining a lot of interest on the consumer side. Google Plus is still a big question mark. Foursquare, if location is part of your play. Ning is an organization, a company that allows you to create your own social network. YouTube and Flickr make a lot of sense for some brands, YouTube in particular, in the B2B space as well. So let's talk about some other resources. Everything that we're doing on email and social, we're putting into this group that we've created on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/groups, and you can see the URL there. Whenever we have blog posts on email and social, we're putting them up there, and we're driving other conversations there as well. We just started it, so please join. It's wide open, and whatever discussions you want to start there, go ahead and do that, and we'll join those conversations, and we'll spread the word as well. Obviously, we're on Facebook, and here's where. We have more than 25 fans, so we get the vanity URL. We're on Twitter at Real Magnet, and we have a whole category on the blog, which you can see there, which is where we're posting all of our email and social content. And the other thing that we're doing, the other resources, is what we call our Social Accelerator Consulting Program. And this is a program where everything that we've just talked about are things that we will come into your organization and help you do. All of the strategy and resources you need to get your social program up to speed. So we will help you with channel strategy and social activation, content development and scheduling, enterprise engagement, the ways to get all of your people involved, both in Twitter and LinkedIn, and figuring out what makes sense for you on that side. Work with you on audience development as well as the analytics and attribution. So I gave you the primer on all of this, and if you want more hands-on help, we can certainly help you with that as well. If you have questions about Social Accelerator or anything else you've seen today, you can contact your account manager or simply email me or tweet to me at the addresses that you see here. Again, thanks for the time today. I hope to hear from you soon, and good luck and be social.